Some neighbors believe that the rules they live by make them the ultimate authority. For Karen, being part of the homeowners association meant she could demand, intrude, and control without consequence. But one evening, while Larry Hopkins was away on an important research trip, she decided boundaries didn't apply to her. She set her eyes not only on his property, but also on his history, the priceless cultural relics he had sworn to protect. What she didn't know was that someone else was protecting them in his absence. Tommy, his loyal German Shepherd, who never let betrayal go unanswered. Larry Hopkins was no ordinary resident in his neighborhood. By profession, he was an archaeologist, one who had spent decades uncovering remnants of civilizations erased by time, yet still echoing through stone, pottery, manuscripts, and artifacts. His home wasn't merely a place of rest, it was a living archive of knowledge. Behind carefully reinforced glass and secured cabinets lay delicate fragments of human history, items entrusted to him after countless expeditions and formal agreements with universities. Though Larry lived a quiet and respectful life, his presence stirred bitterness among a few neighbors. Karen, a self-appointed enforcer within the HOA, couched her dislike in petty regulations. She would complain about the way Larry's lawn grew between visits, or how the style of his mailbox didn't fit the character of the community. Yet beneath the surface, it wasn't grass or decoration that bothered her. It was Larry, the man who carried with dignity the responsibility of artifacts that represented cultures she often belittled. To Karen, his possessions seemed undeserved, and in her arrogance, she felt entitled to peer behind his doors. That resentment grew sharper when Larry left for a brief trip outside the city, leaving only his steadfast companion, Tommy the German Shepherd, to guard the house. Loyal, watchful, and deeply protective, Tommy knew every path, every corner, every scent within the home. It was only a matter of time before Karen saw that absence as opportunity, believing she could finally satisfy her intrusive fixation. Karen's plan wasn't spontaneous. Days before Larry's departure, she had been circling the property like a hawk, observing, waiting for her chance. She posted subtle notes about supposed violations directed toward Larry. Yet underneath those small slips of paper was a growing obsession. She believed history should not be preserved in his home, but exposed, managed, or even confiscated under her interpretation of HOA rules. On the day Larry drove away for his one-day trip, Karen stood at her kitchen window, watching. With car gone and lights dimmed, the house looked inviting, almost vulnerable. Muttering to herself about community standards and HOA oversight, she carried herself across the yard, quietly making her way to the back. One hand tugged at a latch of a gate she had long since memorized, the one corner where shrubbery grew taller, providing unwanted cover. Inside, the stillness of the house both emboldened and unsettled her. To her, it wasn't simple trespassing. In her mind, she was inspecting. The property belonged to the community, she often said, and Larry's artifacts, his maps, his ancient vessels, and his collection of stones carved thousands of years ago were things she told herself she should keep safe from improper storage. But the truth was simpler. She was driven by entitlement. What Karen did not see in her arrogance was the low, steady shadow that moved across the hall. Tommy had been waiting. He knew something was wrong the moment she forced her way inside, his sharp instincts triggered like alarms. For Tommy, Larry's absence did not mean the home was left undefended. Bent over an archaeological chest, her fingers hovered over glass as though preparing to pry it loose. And then in the silence came a growl, low, guttural, and meant to warn. Her heart froze. Turning her head slowly, her eyes met the unwavering amber gaze of a German Shepherd who had no doubt about his mission. The growl turned into a bark, deep and commanding. She stumbled backward, clutching at furniture, calling out nervously, although no one could save her. Tommy advanced carefully, not in blind rage, but with calculated precision. His teeth bared only enough to show that he was the line she could not cross. Her shrieks carried outside the property, though muffled behind the thick walls. In her panic, she stumbled near the exit, but Tommy lunged, catching hold of her shirt and tearing through fabric, halting her escape. It was not savage, but it was stern, a forceful declaration. This house was not hers to claim. When she finally broke free, half her blouse shredded, she scrambled for the door, wide-eyed and shaking. In that moment, or perhaps for the first time, she realized rulebooks and neighborhood titles held no weight against raw justice. As the night deepened and shadows stretched longer across the street, Karen's composure collapsed. She stood outside Larry's home with clothes ripped, hair frayed, and eyes wide with disbelief. Neighbors who had once politely ignored her controlling behavior now watched curiously. It was not the polished defender of HOA values they saw, but a trespasser caught in her own arrogance, with fear stitched across her face as clearly as the claw-marked remnants of her clothing. Larry's return happened mere hours later. Pulling his car into the driveway, he noticed the strange hush of the block. Some people lingered on the sidewalks, whispering in pointed glances. As he stepped from his vehicle, Tommy greeted him, tail wagging, body pressed firmly against his side, while Karen stood pale and rigid on the corner, her lips pressed tightly, avoiding his gaze. Larry asked no questions at first. He didn't need to. Tommy's loyalty spoke louder than words, and Karen's disheveled condition betrayed the rest. A subtle laugh escaped him, not one of cruelty, but of fate. The irony was too powerful to ignore. The very women who accused him of violating rules had violated the most basic one of all: respect for another person's home. For Karen, humiliation replaced authority. Her power within the HOA suddenly seemed fragile, exposed. The equalizing force had not been a committee nor regulation, but a German shepherd named Tommy, standing guard over not only relics of the past, but the dignity of his master. The days following the incident carried a quiet shift within the neighborhood. Though Karen attempted to bury her shame beneath fabricated excuses, her neighbors had seen enough. What once validated her, the authority of a homeowners association, now rang hollow, diminished by the memory of her defeat. The posture of superiority she used to project melted under whispers that labeled her not as protector, but as trespasser. For Larry, the return home came with reflection. His career as an archaeologist was dedicated to preserving civilizations whose voices were often silenced by the arrogance of oppressors. And here, in his own home, he had to witness the same arrogance echoed in something smaller, yet deeply symbolic. Karen believed she had dominion over his identity, his possessions, and even the fragments of culture entrusted to him. In her intrusion, one could see a pattern, a failure to honor boundaries, traditions, and legacies that were not hers to claim. But there was also light amid the bitterness. Tommy, steadfast and loyal, reminded everyone that guardianship is built on respect, not entitlement. He stood as a symbol of protection, not only of property, but of truth itself. Karen never apologized, but she carried the mark of her actions in silence. And Larry, though he laughed at the absurdity of her downfall, knew the lesson ran deeper. The world still brands with those who mask prejudice and control under regulations and rules. The danger is not in the paper they wave, but in the moments they decide those rules allow them to trample others. As neighbors slowly turned back to their own lives, Larry rubbed Tommy's head, whispering thanks only his companion understood. It wasn't merely a dog guarding a house. It was a reminder that even when arrogance tries to intrude, dignity can still be defended. So the question remains, when arrogance and prejudice try to step through the door, will we stand by quietly, or will we guard what truly matters?